Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We have among the cleanest and sharpest, crystal clean, you've heard me say it, I went crystal clean, air and water anywhere on earth. You know, we have the cleanest air in the world in the United States, and it's gotten better since I'm president. We have the cleanest water, it's crystal clean.
America has the cleanest air and water in the world. We'll continue to use market forces.
We don't have the cleanest air and water in the world.
Have you noticed this weird thing that Trump and members of the administration do whenever they are confronted with their abysmal climate policy that's actively making the world hotter and more dangerous? They pivot very hard to a very demonstrable lie that under their tenure, the air and water in this country is the cleanest. In fact, the sharpest. First of all, it's not true. And second of all, it's kind of a non sequitur. And today they were at it again against a backdrop of truly biblical flooding in Washington, D.C. The president gathered up some cabinet secretaries and tried to tout his administration's environmental record.
We want the cleanest air. We want crystal clean water. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we're working on so hard.
I think the world needs to look at your leadership. Look at what you've done.
Today, we have the cleanest air on record, and we are a global leader for access to clean drinking water.
Of all this clean air and water talk and performative environmental concern is arousing your suspicions that it's just an attempt by the Trump administration to shore up what is a genuine political liability, you're correct. The New York Times reporting the idea for today's speech, quote, started with consultants on his re-election campaign who have discovered that his environmental record is a definite turnoff for two key demographics, millennials and suburban women. Which is to say, the public is actually onto the Trump administration. People do care about the climate crisis, and they know the Trump administration doesn't. And so unremarkably, the Trump White House itself understands that it's a political problem as we head into 2020. But if only the public knew just how bad the record really is. Here to talk about the administration's actual record on the environment, as opposed to the rhetoric, Emily Atkin, staff writer at the New Republic, who reports on science and environmental politics, and Tyson Slocum, the energy program director at the advocacy group Public Citizen. Emily, let me start with you because you've written about Andrew Wheeler, who is the man who replaced the almost comically corrupt Scott Pruitt, who made for excellent copy because he was such a ridiculous figure and he had his security detail drive him around to different hotels whose soaps and lotions he liked. What has Wheeler's actual record at EPA been?
I mean, for Andrew Wheeler and Trump to say that they're leaders in protecting the environment, it's sort of like the Cookie Monster saying that he's a leader in vegetables. It's like, you know that they'll say they are, but they're not. And Wheeler and Trump will say that they are protecting the environment, but they're not. Under Andrew Wheeler and Trump, I believe it's 83 regulations that have been that are in the process of being rolled back, 49 of which have already been completed. Those are all environment, climate related. They span the gamut of drinking water, air protections, chemical protections. And Andrew Wheeler himself is a coal lobbyist. That was one of the other funny things about today's speech was that Trump brought up his Secretary of the Department of Interior, David Bernhardt, who's a former oil lobbyist, and he brought up Andrew Wheeler, a former coal lobbyist. These are the two people who are involved of repealing and creating new regulations that are supposed to protect our environment, when in reality what they're putting in are new regulations that are exactly what these industries want, that sort of allow them to operate in the most polluting way possible while still under the guise of that they're being regulated.
Tyson, as Emily refers to, the regulatory state, the modern regulatory state, has a fair amount of power when it comes to things like clean water and clean air and regulating chemicals. On the question of climate, how much power does the executive have, and how has this administration used or not used that power?
The administration has enormous unilateral power. Remember, it was the Obama administration that unilaterally negotiated the Paris Climate Accord and got the rest of the world in line for a climate agreement that then Trump unilaterally dismantled. And you have to remember that one of the individuals that pushed hard to dismantle the climate agreement was Bob Murray, who was absent from today's event. But Bob Murray, the coal magnate who runs Murray Energy, which is the largest privately held coal company, which used to hire Andrew Wheeler to set up meetings for Bob Murray when he was meeting with President Trump. Murray Energy delivered this 16-point action plan, of which repealing and getting out of the Paris Climate Accord was the number one priority. And you have to remember that the Paris Climate Accord, Obama made a ton of concessions on that. He conceded to Republicans that it wouldn't be binding, that developing countries along with developed countries would be on it, and also that it would have fairly modest climate reduction goals. But the radicalness and the absurdness of the Trump administration is even dismantling something like the Paris Climate Accord.
Emily, having covered the Trump administration, do you agree with I am struck that he made the speech at all, and I'm struck that they have consultants telling them that this is actually a political liability for the president.
I think that the rhetoric that he used actually could work with a lot of Americans, and that's why I think they did it. Having covered Trump in general and Republicans and climate change, their rhetoric has shifted a lot in the last just 5 years. I mean, you remember 5 years ago, it was, there is no climate change, it's a hoax. And then it was, well, there is climate change, but it's natural caused, it's humans didn't cause it. Now, Republicans and Trump, they're confronted with the fact that the majority of the public realizes that there's a climate crisis and kind of wants them to do something about it. So almost the genius of this speech was that Trump took that and he was like, he didn't even say this, but the administration does as a whole. They say, okay, there's a climate crisis and humans might be responsible, but American humans are doing a really good job confronting it. He said at one point, Trump didn't say the words climate change in his speech once, but he did actually say, he referenced carbon emissions. He said the U.S. has declined its carbon emissions. They've been down since 2000. It's strategic because our carbon emissions were awful in 2000, so obviously they've declined. But he's sort of saying the message that he and the administration are sending is that we're doing great. This climate crisis thing, that's up to the more polluting countries. Is
it progress, Tyson, at some level for them to have to deal with it, for them even to make the point, as fallacious as it is, about carbon emissions?
Absolutely not.
I mean, I think it shows how incredibly important clean air, clean water, and addressing climate change are to a large majority of American voters, which is why it is so distressing that this administration is doing so much aggressive, lasting damage on these critically important areas and placing former corporate lobbyists for the fossil fuel industry in charge of the federal regulatory apparatus. It has to end.
I think he's handed the Democratic nominee an enormous weapon in 2020. We will see if they use it. Emily Atkin and Tyson Slocum, thank you both.
It is Tuesday, the 9th of July of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Just a little smidgen of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference. It will. It really will. Okay, well, the Epstein story continues to, I don't know, I need a shower every time I hear the name Epstein now. Ooh, I just feel so, oh, got it. Oh. Well, we do live in a salacious time now, don't we? God. I don't know what to say about it. Well, I do know what to say about it, but it's the same old, same old. What would anyone say about a situation like this? And maybe something will be done, and I fear that, maybe it's all being taken care of right now. Will Epstein spill the dirt? That's what a lot of people with a narrative have. You know, that arc, the narrative arc. I think that maybe this guy is so much a part of this group that he may not give up the goods. Because he knows how convenient things can happen. Yeah. It may not come directly from Vlad. But the strategy, you know, it's it transfers to other nation states. It does. It may have already existed there to begin with. One never knows. Okay, well, that continues to titillate and offend. Yeah, it better offend. So there's so much more news going on in the world other than the fact that, I don't know, little kids are dying at the border, and we don't have death camps because they're private, all right? If it was a government-sanctioned, wholly run government operation, well, then you might have an argument. But since they're private, really, they can just do anything they want. Really now. Okay. I guess they have the sign there in their little strip mall icebox baby gulag concentration camps that say, we reserve the right to abuse anyone at any time, no matter your age, ethnicity, and especially, though, if your ethnicity is brown or some dark shade that we deem, well, outside of us. Okay. Can't get a job with Border Patrol unless you're racist enough. They kick out the racists because, hey, we're talking strength here. And humanity is weak. Showing humanity to another thing. Obviously, is not the requisite behavior required in that authoritarian position of border guard. Or whatever they have at ICE and border protection. I'm not shocked by this. I've been arguing this for quite some time. Even if you had no direct evidence of it, you could just feel it, couldn't you? Okay. Now, I know that some people, they took those police science courses in junior college, and, you got to take what you know and apply it. And when jobs open up in law enforcement in any capacity, a lot of people want to jump on it because it could eventually be their step to, what they really want to do in law enforcement. So I will accept the argument that a lot of good people entered into ICE and border protection with all the good intents that Americans have when they're going to work for their government. Except those good-hearted ones got fired or never hired to begin with, okay? Let's be clear. If you don't use the requisite racist terms when referring to whomever may be on the border, or whomever you have decided are the other, and you're going to give, putative torture to, because that's really what it is. You really can't refer to them as sweetie and honey, even if it is in a derisive tone. It's got to be something else. And yes, if you're not racist, you don't get to work for ICE and border protection. Let's be clear. Okay, well, I got that off. Oh, boy, it feels so much better now. So what's going on in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well. Trump touted his environmental record as a biblical flood swamped Washington, D.C. It was almost knee-high. Knee-high in places, deeper in other places, too. That was a lot of water rushing through D.C. Well, on the rest of the menu, 3 states that let undocumented immigrants get driver's licenses are handing their photos over to ICE. Remember all the Second Amendment people saying, I don't want to be on a gun registry? Now you know why. A GOP senator is busted for using fake statistics about asylum seekers, and why wouldn't they? I mean, they can't argue the argument on the merits. They have to lie. And Trump has invited infamous right-wing bigots to the White House to complain about social media. He's not getting what he wants. And he really wants a lot of cult devotees kissing his you-know-where. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where the arrest of 2 Russians in Libya for election interference are linked directly to a sanctioned oligarch raising money for Maria Butina. Yeah, the spy. And after mass protests, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said the China extradition bill is dead. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice a social media scroll, and right there is the chat room link, which is, well, you could construe that as a part of social media, and it is. And Kelly Lincoln monitors that, and we thank Kelly for doing that. And also, I should announce her monitoring duties may be abbreviated because she will be in Philadelphia for Netroots Nation. So if you happen to be at Netroots Nation, check out Netroots Radio on Radio Row. Our banner will be there. You'll find us. And Kelly may be roaming around taking in panels and speaking to a few people. And but if you are in Philadelphia, do check us out and say hi. And we thank Kelly for doing that. And I should mention also, I will be interviewing Ian Reifowitz on his new book, The Tribalization of American Politics, and it really has something to do with Rush Limbaugh, with footnotes. And I have my own feelings about Rush Limbaugh, not very different from anybody else in America with critical thinking skills. So I'm looking forward to that, and Kelly will be producing, so thank you, Kelly. Alrighty. If you would then take a gander, yeah, we use that kind of language around here, even in the early morning. So please do. Take a gander to the leftish of the page, and there you will notice our Patreon link. And if you could, please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Something as simple as a espresso latte coffee type drink, the funds that you would purchase that, if you could send just one of those coffee drinks to us once a month, that goes a long way in helping us pay our bills, and we are also accumulating funds to purchase newish equipment. These workhorses have been working, and though they be not dead, oh my God, they could keel over at any time. That's how it works. We have been broadcasting here at Netroots Radio for 8 years of continuous 24/7, 365 broadcasting. And we did have to get some newish machinery about halfway through. So you take that halfway through and then extrapolate it to another, what could be halfway through. And it looks like we're getting pretty darn close to, we got to let these workhorses, ease their way out. They will still be working, but not as hard and dedicated. So we have you to thank for allowing us to even think about accumulating those funds like we did all those many years ago where you came to the fore and helped. Thank you. So your generosity is very much appreciated. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so easy. Tom takes care of that. And you know what he named the handle? At Netroots Radio. Isn't that something? Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, well, I take care of that. And I don't know why, but I got stuck naming it at Cookbook West. So take note, and that's where we are. If you would also like to get podcasts of Netroots Radio, you can do so by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, wherever podcasts are in the whole wide world, and there's millions, billions. We are in the W's. Okay, you don't have to scroll down. Just go right to the W's, and we will be there, indeed. All right, let's take a gander. Yes, we do use that language very early in the morning for some. I know it's, almost noon in other places in the world. Just saying. But we are now in Think Progress here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and Joshua Eaton brings us this first offering. At least 3 states that let undocumented immigrants legally obtain driver's licenses have opened up their photo databases to ICE, in a practice dating back to the Obama administration. Well, then it's okay. Okay? Trump will tell us that if the black guy did it, well, then it's okay. Good. Now, just because they've been doing it since the Obama administration doesn't necessarily mean it was really Obama's okay. Not necessarily. And if it was done in a particularly different manner, as we may find out here. ICE has run facial recognition searches on State Department of Motor Vehicle databases in Utah, Vermont, and Washington, all of which allow undocumented immigrants to drive legally using state-issued IDs. The startling revelation is part of a Washington Post story based on a trove of documents obtained by Georgetown law researchers through public records. Oh my God, public records, that's the enemy of the people. Don't let Trump know. The documents show how officials with ICE and the FBI have let facial recognition technology loose on state driver's license databases to help solve relatively minor crimes like immigration violations and petty theft. Well, yeah, you have to try it out on that, because then when you go after people for blogging certain derogatory remarks like, I love America, why is Trump president? It's much, you got to test out, that technology on, minor crimes like immigration and petty theft before you go for really constitutional violations. You really have to. The practice is not limited to federal law enforcement, the Post reported, with local police also requesting that DMV officials in other states search their databases. But using facial recognition technology on state driver's license databases has become routine among federal law enforcement. Now, are we talking Big Brother? Are we talking about Skynet? I would posit that it's going to be a mashup of Big Brother and Skynet. Many of those searches are not governed by any legal process like a warrant or a subpoena, because facial recognition technology, Skynet, and Big Brother are like the Guantanamo of law enforcement. There's no rules there. None. Well, no rules that would be under the aegis of the U.S. Constitution. The records show 2,000 searches by federal officials in Utah between 2015 and 2017, about half of which came from local law enforcement across the country, while the other half came from federal officials. Well, that's a good balance between states and federal, overreach. The practice has broad privacy implications at a time when technology is moving faster than laws and regulations. Oh, really? Well, I've heard it argued that nation-states and societies in general are usually a lot more immature than the technologies that, well, they've discovered. News about the practice also comes as the Trump administration is using every tool at its disposal to crack down on undocumented immigrants across the country, and I would say, in this reporter's opinion, their fellow travelers too, literally. Officials at the technology behemoth Amazon.com met with ICE last summer to discuss how the agency could use Amazon's facial recognition technology called Recognition. Oh, they got a K in there. Why don't you add 2 more? Those meetings focused on a division of ICE called Homeland Security Investigations that has used facial recognition technology for criminal investigations related to fraudulent activities, identity theft, and child exploitation crimes. You know, like bringing your kid from a war-torn, bombed-out hovel and trying to get to America for asylum? You mean those kind of child exploitation crimes? Better take that kid away from the parent and punish them. And when I say them, I mean the kid and the parent. Trump has threatened sweeping ICE raids that could target thousands of undocumented immigrants across the country unless Congress tightens U.S. asylum laws, a move he delayed last month. U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, my senator here in Oregon, expressed concern that technology providing unfettered access to facial recognition data could easily be misused. Really? When has law enforcement ever misused the technology that they were handed? When? Claire Garvey, a senior associate with Georgetown Law's Center on Privacy and Technology, told the Post that local governments have encouraged undocumented immigrants to submit their private information. Now they are obligated to keep that information confidential. To me, she said, it's an insane breach of trust to then turn around and allow ICE access to that, in which this reporter would opine it was a feature, not a bug. Dan Desai Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Be warned, there is roasted corn in this chowder because, hey, that's how it becomes Tarrytown now, doesn't it? Rather than tell the truth, Senator Martha McSally, a repug of Arizona, by the way, gave a false statement about the percentage of asylum seekers who have a legitimate claim to stay in the United States. In a late May television interview, McSally falsely claimed that more than 90% of asylum claims are, quote, not legitimate asylum cases, end quote. Well, according to the Arizona Republic fact-checkers, this claim is misleading and leaves out a large portion of those seeking asylum in the United States and ignores the complicated processes immigration courts must adhere to. And that's according to the Arizona Republic. The paper points out that there are different ways people can request asylum, affirmative or defensive, and different methods for granting asylum. No wonder they want to get rid of judges. They just like things black and white, literally. That's all the black. Keep them out. This is the white, and we're here, so I'll go away. The paper points out also that through a federal judge or by a U.S. customs officer, those methods are then decided. Now, McSally based her claim on a narrow set of defensive asylum seekers where cases were decided by a judge and only from 3 Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. You know, the ones that we propped up with right-wing military death squads during the Reagan years. Yeah, you know, we were selling guns to terrorists and, taking American hostages over there in Iran, okay? And then we were using those monies to prop up this right-wing death squad war in the countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. I don't want to do a Reverend Right on you if you even remember that, but hey, the chickens have come home to roost. An honest assessment of even just defensive asylum cases show 21% of asylum seekers were granted asylum in 2018. 21%. Further, many minors applying for asylum directly were where an asylum officer considers and grants the claim to asylum. And that's including, that 21% included those kids. McSally's attack on asylum seekers through misinformation lines up with Trump's anti-immigrant agenda. Like Trump, McSally wants to jail children and families for longer than current law allows. Because cruelty is the point now, isn't it? Not the rule of law. All right, in this reporter's opinion, but still, it really is. In the same interview, McSally whined about the current legal limitations forbidding the federal government from jailing children for longer than 20 days. Come on. We have all these icebox baby gulags. We have to fill them up. They're already paid for. Recent news reports exposed horrific conditions at these facilities. Children are forced to sleep on cold concrete floors in overcrowded conditions, denied showers, fed uncooked frozen meals. One doctor who observed the children compared the detention camps to torture facilities. Well, that's a feature, not a bug either, please. McSally represents a border state in the U.S. Senate, and she is unwilling or unable to be truthful about conditions on the border. Her approach to immigration, including a disturbing lack of candor, line up with Trump, but not with reality. And in this reporter's opinion, not with anything that might even be closely construed as being humane. Of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The White House is set to host a social media summit on Thursday that does not include leading social media companies like Facebook and Twitter, but does include some infamously racist and anti-Semitic far-right conservatives. Beltway Breakfast reported earlier this week, which would be yesterday, Monday, that among the invitees are Trump-supporting conservative activists Ali Alexander, also known as Ali Akbar, and Ben Garrison. Alexander recently pushed a racist conspiracy theory about Senator Kamala Harris, and Harrison is a cartoonist who is notorious for an anti-Semitic piece of artwork. The inclusion of hateful figures like Alexander and Garrison and the exclusion of major social media platforms are just the latest indication that this White House summit is not a serious gathering to discuss important issues like internet privacy or foreign election interference. Instead, is most likely an attempt to bolster unfounded conservative claims that social media platforms are biased against them. Indeed. And why wouldn't they be? The whole world hates him and his fellow travelers. During the June 27 Democratic presidential debate, Alexander wrote a tweet that falsely claimed Kamala Harris is not an American black. She is half Indian and half Jamaican. Well, BuzzFeed noted that Alexander's smear has long been simmering in fringe conspiracy and neo-Nazi circles, and that Harris has been subjected to racist attacks on her heritage, similar to the birther smears against President Barack Obama. Trump was for years the leading promoter of the racist birther attacks against Obama, and Trump Jr. amplified Alexander's similar attack on Harris by retweeting it. Many of Harris's fellow Democratic candidates slammed the racist attacks of the sort being circulated by Trump's White House guest. Elizabeth Warren called the conspiracy theories racist and ugly. Amy Klobuchar bashed the troll-fueled racist attacks as unacceptable. Garrison, the cartoonist, was slammed by the Anti-Defamation League for a 2017 cartoon depicting philanthropist and Holocaust survivor George Soros as the puppet master of Trump's then National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster. Oh, you mean the one that looked almost exactly like the Nazi propaganda with the big-nosed Jews? Back in the day, you mean that cartoon? Telling. Soros, who is Jewish, is himself depicted in the cartoon with puppet strings, being guided by a greenish hand and an arm labeled Rothschilds, the name of a Jewish family long involved in the banking industry. The thrust of the cartoon is clear. McMaster is merely a puppet of a Jewish conspiracy. Garrison has also created several other cartoons invoking viciously anti-Semitic tropes. Trump infamously praised neo-Nazis and white supremacists as very fine people early in his administration, so it's no wonder he would grant a prestigious White House invitation to bigots like Alexander and Garrison. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
But Mom...
Don't but Mom me. You heard what the doctor said.
I'm fine. I just got my bell rung. It's not like I blacked out.
You've had headaches, dizzy spells, and you're just not yourself. That's not feeling fine.
Come on, I can't miss the game.
It's still serious, even if you didn't black out. It's better to miss one game than the whole season.
All concussions are serious. Know the warning signs and never let your child return to play before a healthcare professional says it's okay. A message from CDC.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com. All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
This Civil Liberties Minute is about prison labor and a high school. I'm Bill Newman. As part of a journalism class, an Amherst, Massachusetts high school senior, Spencer Cleash, wrote a 3,000-word expose on how his school system was using prison labor, inmates at Norfolk State Prison, to reupholster the high school and middle school's auditorium seats. The school system secured that contract for a reason. Massachusetts prison labor is cheap. Prisoners are paid between 14 cents and $1 an hour, according to the Department of Correction. This extremely well-written story puts competing interests in sharp relief. On one hand, the prisoners are being totally exploited. On the other hand, the work can teach a skill. The story has gone viral. And as a result of the expose, the school system has announced that it will no longer use prison contract labor. There's an even bigger story to this story. And that is that good, accurate, thoughtful, well-written reporting still matters. This work by young people disproves Trump's insidious pronouncements that the press is the enemy of the people. It's not. And the students at the Amherst Regional High School journalism class, as Crosby, Stills, and Nash put it, have taught us well. Teach your parents well. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1984. Jacqueline Vaughn became president of the Chicago Teachers Union. Jackie started out as a teacher and became a member of the collective bargaining team in 1968. She was elected vice president of the CTU in 1972, and then became the first black woman to head up the third largest teachers union in the nation. Between 1969 and 1987, the union authorized 9 strikes to improve conditions for students and teachers. The longest teacher strike to that date was in 1987. It lasted 4 weeks. Teachers won a pay increase and a reduction in class size. Vaughn once said, "I think that teacher strikes should not have to occur. But just as it is for other workers, the strike is the ultimate weapon when there's a total breakdown in the negotiating process." Vaughn was skilled at building consensus among members of the union leadership team. She was also a visionary. She was able to get a $1 million grant from the MacArthur Foundation to support the CTU Quest Center. This center gives teaching teams a place to design their own methods of structuring both the teaching and learning process. Jacqueline Vaughn was elected president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers in 1989, where she represented more than 70,000 Illinois Federation of Teachers members throughout the state. Vaughn's Chicago Teacher Union successor, President Tom Reese, observed, "She left us footprints, not only behind her, but leading ahead. We intend to follow them." Jacqueline Vaughn was one of many Chicago Teachers Union leaders who left their mark on Chicago public school students and teachers. She paved the way for another progressive CTU president, today's Karen Lewis, who continues to valiantly fight against neighborhood school closures and massive funding cuts in the Chicago public schools budget.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Millionaire Jeffrey Epstein was indicted Monday, accused of operating a sex trafficking ring in which he sexually abused dozens of underage girls. Epstein pleaded not guilty to 2 charges. He faces up to 45 years in prison if convicted on both counts.
Contemporaneous with the arrest of Epstein at Teterboro Airport, agents executed a search warrant on his mansion in New York City. Agents seized evidence, including nude photographs of what appeared to be underage girls.
Epstein will remain in detention at least until next week, following preliminary court proceedings Monday. Law enforcement officials gave credit to the Miami Herald and reporter Julie K. Brown's work while announcing the indictment at a presser, saying, quote, "We were assisted by some excellent investigative journalism." Brown said other powerful people are likely sweating it out today.
Needless to say, these are very powerful people, and I think that they're sweating a little bit, especially today. We don't know how deep this went, how far reaching it went in government, but there's been a lot of people that, I could see their names on these message pads on a regular basis as part of the evidence. These message pads where they would call Epstein and leave messages such as, "I'm at this hotel." Why do you do that? Except that you're expecting him perhaps to send a girl to visit you at your hotel. So there's probably quite a few important people, powerful people who are sweating it out right now. We'll have to wait and see whether Epstein's going to name names or what kind of information he's going to try to trade in order to, maybe get out of this in some way or lower his culpability.
The case also has political implications because of allegations that Alex Acosta, who is now Donald Trump's labor secretary, mishandled the investigation into Epstein when Acosta was a U.S. attorney. Some now want Acosta to resign, including Nancy Pelosi, who tweeted Monday night, "Secretary Acosta must step down. As U.S. attorney, he engaged in an unconscionable agreement with Jeffrey Epstein, kept secret from courageous young victims, preventing them from seeking justice." This was known by POTUS when he appointed him to the cabinet. #Acosta resign. Donald Trump struck back at the UK diplomat who called him inept and clumsy in leaked diplomatic cables. Here's CNN's Aaron Burnett.
President Trump vowing never to again deal with the British ambassador to the United States, the top diplomat of America's closest ally. Why? Well, because Ambassador Kim Derrick criticized the president in private messages that were leaked. President Trump tweeting, quote, "I do not know the ambassador, but he is not liked or well thought of within the United States. We will no longer deal with him." Well, first of all, Trump, of course, does know Ambassador Derrick. He's met him multiple times. In fact, Derrick was actually scheduled to have dinner with President Trump tonight until he was disinvited. Because now Derrick is dead to Trump. And this was the nail in the coffin. Derrick writing in one of the leaked documents, quote, "We don't really believe this administration is going to become substantially more normal, less dysfunctional, less unpredictable, less faction-driven, less diplomatically clumsy and inept." Adding that he doesn't think the White House will, quote, "ever look competent."
Congress comes back into session Tuesday, beginning a 3-week stretch until the August recess. Over 7 million Americans have become uninsured under Trump's health care regime. On Tuesday, his lawyers will ask a court to kill the Affordable Care Act and kick tens of millions of people off their health insurance.
Obamacare faces a big test in New Orleans. The Fifth Circuit of the U.S. Court of Appeals will hear arguments between the Trump administration and 18 Republican-led states on the one hand and a score of Democratic-led states on the other over the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. If you're scratching your head right now, yes, we have been here before. The Supreme Court has upheld the ACA twice. But it's back before the federal courts after a federal district judge in Texas ruled the entire law invalid last year. As the Washington Post points out, no matter the circuit court's ruling, Republicans stand to gain little. If the court sides with Democrats, Republicans walk away defeated. If the Fifth Circuit sides with Republicans, ruling the ACA unconstitutional, it would almost certainly catapult the issue back before the Supreme Court. And if that happens, and the high court were to decline the case, The drama would raise fresh uncertainties for millions of Americans who could lose coverage and protections that were created under the law. That includes people with pre-existing conditions, whom President Trump has promised to protect.
Meanwhile, a federal judge blocked a major White House initiative on prescription drug costs, saying the Trump administration lacked the legal authority to require drug makers to disclose prices in TV ads. The first casualty of the 2020 presidential primary is here. Eric Swalwell is out of the Democratic race. And billionaire Tom Steyer's big ego is reportedly getting in.
I got good news.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 62 degrees Fahrenheit. We are slated for a high of about 77 to 78. Currently under cloudy conditions, a very large cell, or shall I put it this way, several very large cells that may amass into one giant glob of water over the ocean is headed our way. Local forecasters are calling, well, I wouldn't say local. Local news stations who use some sort of weather service from somewhere else say it's a slight chance of rain. But anybody who's lived in Oregon or the West Coast knows what that glob of water means when it's hanging over the ocean headed our way. Okay, well, it looks like if it gets here, which it certainly does because it feels quite humid right now, it is expected to drop a tenth to a quarter. And I'll take any amount of minerals in water form falling from the sky. Winds are currently light and variable out of the northwest. Will be shifting out of the west, light and variable, and that's why they say it's only, or could just be a slight chance. I don't know. They say 40%. That 40% can go up, and it will. Winds will pick up tonight out of the due west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Overnight lows in the low 60s, and tomorrow will bump back up into the mid 80s, which is still a little bit cooler than normal. Or shall we say cooler than what the normal has been for a while. Ouch. So, okay, well, I just got a refresh, and those that possibility of rain, the percentage has now bumped up to over 50%, just a slight tick above. All right, grass pollen still remains high. The air quality index is good at 15 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Do take care if you see that number wherever you are. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.78 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 78%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 74 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 78 and sunny. Rome is 95 and sunny, and now they have a heat advisory. It's about time. Kiev is 72 and fair. Kabul is 88 and fair. Hong Kong is 83 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 67 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia, is 48 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California, is 56 and cloudy. And New York, is 80 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Casey Michelle of Think Progress brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A series of media reports over the weekend reveal that Libyan authorities have arrested a pair of Russian men in connection with attempts to interfere in Libya's upcoming election. The two men, Maxim Shugale and Alexander Prokofiev, denied any attempt at interference, but both have direct links to an organization run by Alexander Malkovich, a Russian national sanctioned by the U.S., specifically for his prior attempts at targeting Americans with online disinformation via the online site USA Really. American authorities tied U.S. Really directly to Yevgeny Prigozhin, a sanctioned Russian national close to the Kremlin who oversaw Russia's 2016 online disinformation campaign. Malkovich has since left U.S. Really, but now leads the Foundation for the Protection of National Values, a Russian group in which the two men arrested in Libya belong. Now, this is hardly the first time an outfit linked to Malkovich has been accused of interfering abroad. Apart from his work with USA Really, which regularly pumped disinformation aimed at Americans, he recently helped oversee fundraising efforts for the lawyers of Maria Butina, the convicted Russian spy who herself worked closely with now sanctioned Russian official Alexander Torshin. Those fundraising efforts for Butina's American lawyers are ongoing and include Alexander Ionev, a Russian national who helped build links between Russia and American secession groups in states like Texas, California, and Oregon.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Donnie Kwok and Anne-Maria Rowantree of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said the extradition bill that sparked the Chinese-ruled city's biggest crisis in decades is dead, and that government work on the legislation had been a total failure, but critics accused her of playing with words. The bill, which would allow people in Hong Kong to be sent to mainland China to face trial in courts controlled by the Communist Party, sparked huge and at times violent street protests and plunged the former British colony into turmoil. Lam responded to protests that drew hundreds of thousands of people on the streets by suspending the bill, but that did not stop demonstrations that shut down government offices and brought parts of the financial center to a standstill. Yet, Lam still insists the extradition bill is dead. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you know the Netroots Radio's not dead. It's going to broadcast on. Indeed, we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.